The last winter watch fire. You smell the wood smoke before you see it. In the high timber country of central Oregon, the wind carries strange things: pine sap, wolf musk, and on some frozen mornings the faint scent of fire where no one should be. It's January 1924, and you're riding shotgun in a Model T rattling along a snow-choked trail near Lava Lake. Snowbanks taller than a man rise on either side, and the trees lean heavy under the weight of silence. The men you're looking for: Edward Nichols, Roy Wilson, and Dewey Morris should have come down from their trapline by now. They'd planned to winter in the mountains, running lines for mink, otter, and fox. Rough men, sure, but seasoned, familiar with the frostbite ache in their teeth, dependable. So, when January turns to February, and no one's heard a word, people start whispering. It's a whisper that gets louder in places like Bend and Lapine. Haven't seen the boys. Should have been back weeks ago. Maybe they ran off to Canada. The townsfolk start with jokes, poker debts, women, moonshine runs, but laughter turns to frowns when Roy's uncle rides out to check their cabin and doesn't return. Now the snow creaks beneath your boots as you step from the car, your breath turning silver in the air. There's a faint orange glow through the trees, not sunrise firelight. The campfire is still going. And that's the first wrong thing, because no one's there to tend it. The trappers' camp is hidden deep in the pines, nestled near the frozen edge of Lava Lake. You duck under a branch and find their tent standing, canvas taut, stakes solid. The fire pit smolders with fresh coals, maybe a day old. Inside the tent, 3 cots, 3 heavy coats, 3 rifles leaning against the wall, and no footprints in or out of camp. You pause, listening. The forest hums with quiet, not even the crow's caw, just the groan of trees settling under their own weight. By the time the sheriff arrives, the temperature has dipped to 10 below. Flashlights sweep across frozen ground. The dog pen nearby holds bones and collars the trappers' hounds, left to starve. That's when the deputies stop smiling. Something's very wrong here. On the table inside the cabin, a half-eaten meal, mugs of tea crusted over. One man's journal ends mid-sentence. Going out to check snares, Roy thinks he heard. And then nothing. Just a jagged ink line. Major case detail. All 3 men had disappeared from the camp, without their gear, coats, or rifles. The fire was recently lit, implying someone returned after the disappearance. Little known fact, investigators discovered that the men's traps, dozens of them, had been meticulously emptied and reset after their disappearance. Someone was still working their lines in resolved controversy. Was the killer a local rival trapper, or someone sent to scare them off the land, or was it one of the men who turned on the others in a fit of madness and vanished into the woods? You hear the stories start almost immediately from an old logger. Sometimes things walk these woods that don't leave tracks. From a waitress in town. My sister dated Dewey once, said he could see things in the trees. From the sheriff himself, I've seen cabins go cold, but I've never seen one stand still like that. Like death held it in place. There's a strange, soft humor in it too. One deputy gets frostbite because he refused to wear sissy mittens. A local preacher offers to cleanse the site, but falls into the lake and loses his Bible. And the governor, when asked if he'll send state resources, replies, "Oregon's full of missing bearded men. Let me know when you find one with a necktie." But no one is laughing for long, because Lava Lake is just starting to thaw, and something beneath the ice is waiting to be found. The cold has a way of keeping secrets. You step through the threshold of the trapper's cabin with your breath fogging around your face like ghosts trying to whisper. It's March now, and the snow is crusted into a blinding white plate around Lava Lake. The search team has finally brought horses with sleds and enough fuel to last a few days. But it's not just supplies they carry, it's dread. Every man who steps onto this land seems to feel it in his chest, a pressure, like being watched by the trees inside the cabin. Everything is still. You take in the scene slowly, like reading the first lines of a very bad dream. 3 beds, 3 rifles hung on pegs, boots lined neatly, a kettle rusted to the stovetop, half full with something frozen thick and black. On the small dining table, a Bible lies open to Psalm 55. Fear and trembling come upon me, and horror overwhelms me. That's the second wrong thing. The dogs outside are long dead. Yes, but inside, There are no signs of panic, no overturned chairs, no blood, no struggle. Whoever or whatever came here didn't need to force their way in. The men either welcomed it or never saw it coming. You walk over to the window, brush away the frost, and look out at the lake. The surface is beginning to crack. Faintly, a line like a silver scar. The search team spreads out. They follow. The trapline trails for miles in all directions. Dozens of snares hang empty, carefully reset. Someone had continued tending them weeks after the men vanished. One tracker, old Jim Renner, finds something unsettling. Deep in a stand of trees, he discovers a makeshift lean-to with remnants of a bedroll and a scorched coffee pot. But there are no footprints, no sled marks, just that quiet impression that someone had been watching the cabin from the woods for days, maybe weeks. He doesn't sleep that night. Later, he tells you, that place, it didn't feel empty. It felt like something had stepped out, just long enough for us to arrive. Major case detail: the inside of the cabin showed no signs of violence. It appeared undisturbed, as if the men simply vanished while still preparing meals and tending to their daily routine. Little known fact: a single cigarette, but fresh, unsmoked, was found on the windowsill, balanced delicately. It hadn't been there before. Some believe the killer returned to the scene and resolved controversy. Was the killer someone who lived in the forest nearby? There were rumors of a strange mountain man seen weeks before the disappearance, a silent drifter with a scarred face and no known name. Whispers begin to spread in the nearby towns. You hear it in the general store in Bend. The men are probably just frozen stiff up there, stacked like firewood, in a speakeasy near Redmond. I heard one of them killed the other two and just walked into the lake. And from a former Pinkerton-turned farmer, there are Germans hiding in those hills, left over from the war. Mark my words, no one has answers, but everyone has a theory, and somewhere between the laughter and the liquor, fear begins to take root, not just of murder but of the unknown, of how easily men can vanish in the woods. A few darkly absurd asides surface. A local reporter gets stuck in a snowbank for 9 hours and files a headline reading, "Hell is cold and found in Oregon." One of the searchers claims he heard a woman singing in the trees at dusk until someone points out it was just his own echo. The county clerk issues a formal warning: due to high snowfall, lava-related hauntings may not be investigated until spring. Still, the lake begins to thaw and the water is about to give up the truth. You stand in the cabin's doorway one last time before leaving. It's quiet now. The firewood's been stacked by the sheriff's men. The dogs buried in shallow graves beneath the snow. You stare at the empty beds, the cold stove, the 3 rifles that were never fired. The wind outside rises into a low moan. Or maybe it's something else, a story held in the lungs of the land, waiting for you to listen. The ice breaks like glass. It's late April when the thaw begins. The snow retreats in slow bruises, and Lava Lake starts to sigh under the warmth. You're back again, boots sinking into mud now. Instead of frost, the air heavy with melting pine needles and the rot of things long buried. The first body surfaces at dawn. It floats near the lake's northern finger, a place known to old for trappers as Dead Man's Hollow. Though no one remembers why, the corpse bobs gently, wrapped in barbed wire, its face a pale smear of what it once was. No one speaks as they drag it to shore. A crowd of 10 men stands silent, hats in hand, and then 2 more bodies are found, weighted the same way, wrapped the same. Shot in the head. The silence breaks like bones snapping. The coroner examines them with shaking hands in a canvas tent pitched near the water. Edward Nichols, Roy Wilson, Dewey Morris, all 3 executed with surgical precision gunshots. Behind the ear, their wrists bound with baling wire, rocks tied to their legs with logging chain. Whoever killed them had done so with care and time. That's the 3rd wrong thing. This wasn't a crime of passion. It was ritual, calculated, personal. Major case detail: each victim was shot in the head, hands bound, and wrapped in barbed wire. The level of coordination suggests the killer had intimate knowledge of their camp schedule and routine, and may have lived among them. Little known fact: one of the bodies, Roy's, had a -30 caliber slug still lodged in the skull, the same caliber owned by a known rival trapper who later fled the state, but was never charged in resolved controversy. Despite the precision of the killings, no forensic trail was found. Some suspect the murderer had military training. Possibly a veteran of WWI with wilderness experience. The town changes after that bend starts. Locking its doors at night, the general store starts selling out of bullets. People whisper in the barber shops, the churches, and the little schoolhouse with its whitewashed bell. You hear it on every corner. It had to be someone local. You're sitting at the bar one night, the body's still fresh in your mind, when an old man leans over and says, "You want to know what I think? I think them boys dug up something they weren't supposed to, something in the woods. The kind of thing you bury again, or it buries you." He doesn't laugh when he says it. Darkly ironic moments begin to pepper the investigation. A deputy tries to drain part of the lake using a hand pump, and accidentally floods the sheriff's tent instead. A local psychic offers to commune with the lake spirits for $2 to $50 per seance, until she's caught stealing beef jerky from the general store. A Portland journalist reports that the men were likely victims of a Sasquatch-related territorial dispute, citing matted fur found on a nearby tree, later confirmed to be a discarded raccoon pelt. But the laughter doesn't last. The funeral is held in silence. 3 pine boxes. 3 families numb with grief and fury. The mothers weep. The brothers seethe. Someone tosses a cigarette into the lake and mutters, "Hope he drowns in the same black water." The killer or killers have vanished. You feel it. Standing by the shoreline, the water has calmed again, as if satisfied, as if the debt was paid, but the forest hasn't spoken its last word. You take one final look across Lava Lake as the sun sets, turning the surface gold. Then blood red, mist coils along the trees like something alive. You hear a distant bird call, or maybe a voice. There's a moment, brief and hollow, when you could swear you see someone standing on the far side of the lake, just watching. Then they're gone. You smell tobacco on the wind. It's late May, and you're sitting with Sheriff Elkins in his office, a cramped, timber-walled room that smells of mildew and regret. The Lava Lake case has gone cold in official terms. The headlines have faded, but Elkins hasn't stopped. He pulls out a folder that looks like it's been rolled over by a mule cart. Inside, maps, trapline schedules, scribbled notes, and a photograph. It's blurry, but you see 3 figures in front of a lean-to, laughing. One of them, Edward, maybe has a bottle in his hand. The caption on the back reads, "The Last Good Day, DEC 15, 1923. Then the sheriff taps the corner of the folder, pulling free a name that keeps showing up: Joseph Little Joe Dorran, rival trapper, hermit, known hothead, one bad season away from starvation. He'd been seen feuding with Edward over territory before, was run out of Lapine after pistol whipping a store clerk over whiskey, fought in the war, lived in the forest by himself. He's your first real suspect. But here's the problem: no one's seen him since January. Major case detail: Joseph Dorran, once known for aggressively poaching traplins, had disappeared the same winter the murders occurred. Rumors said he'd been seen near the Lava Lake trailhead, carrying chains. Little known fact: an old sheep herder claimed he found a rusted -32 revolver, wrapped in oilcloth and tucked into a hollow tree, but the sheriff's office never logged it as evidence. The herder died a week later from pneumonia. The gun vanished in resolved controversy. Some investigators believed Little Joe had an accomplice, a former partner or brother, who helped execute the murders and erase the tracks, but no second suspect was ever named. You drive the old roads out toward the tree line, the Model T bucking like a dying horse, up into the hills where no one builds fences, up past the riverbends and abandoned mills and cabins choked with blackberry vines. You find what you're looking for just before sunset: a collapsed shack, half swallowed by pine needles. Inside, the air is thick with the musk of bear scat and mildew, and they're scored into the wooden beam. Above the hearth you find a carving: 3 names, scratched deep: Edward Roy Dewey, and below that, "Told you I'd come back." The sheriff orders a second sweep of the area. They find more carvings on nearby trees, not names, just tally marks, 13 of them. No one can say why. You hear rumors that someone was squatting in the old Dorran shack weeks after the killing, someone who lit no fires, wore no shoes, and vanished before dawn. A forest spirit, a killer in rags, depends who you ask. In the bar in Bend, a drunk logger tells you, "I saw Dorran 2 nights ago. He asked if the lake was still frozen. Then he smiled like it was a joke, only he understood. You don't sleep well that night. The strange, half-laughable details keep trickling in. A bootlegger claims he saw ghostly lights moving across Lava Lake one night, like lanterns walking on ice. Turns out, it was a pair of drunken teenagers with fireworks, or so they say. A woman and sisters swears she heard someone whisper her name while hiking the trail near the lake. Her name is Lucinda, the only mention of Lucinda in the case. Dewey's missing sister, who hadn't spoken to him in years. A spiritualist offers to conduct a seance by the cabin, charges $5 a head, predicts the killer will be caught in shadow, is promptly arrested for tax fraud. Still, no one finds Dorran. No body, no bones, no footprints. It's as if the trees took him back. Sheriff Elkins retires a year later. You see him sometimes, sitting on his porch, staring at the edge of the woods, like they might start whispering. Again, he says, sometimes justice don't knock. It just walks past your door real slow. You return to Lava Lake one last time that year. The water is still, no wind, no birds. The only sound is the hush of the forest pressing in around you. You walk to the edge, crouch by the old fire pit. Something glints in the dirt. It's a single brass button. You pick it up, and suddenly you remember. Dewey's coat had brass buttons. His coat had never been found. The button is warm from the sun, or maybe not from the sun at all. You return in winter. The trees are bare now, skeletal limbs scraping the sky, like they're trying to claw their way out of the past. Snow covers everything again. The cabin stands empty, though the roof has begun to sag. One of the window panes is missing, and the wind slides through the opening with a long, low sigh. You light a lantern and step inside. The beds are gone, the stove rusted, but the Bible still sits there, open to the same page, Psalm 55. My heart is in anguish within me, and the terrors of death have fallen upon me. You tell yourself it's just coincidence, but you don't believe that. Not anymore. The case never closes. Joseph Dorran is never found. The state issues a bench warrant, but no one pursues it. Over the years, a dozen men are named in barroom theories, deathbed confessions, or backcountry gossip. One trapper in Idaho, a veteran in Montana, a bootlegger in Klamath Falls, who vanished just before trial but no charges stick. The story, like the forest, just keeps growing. Major case detail. Despite ongoing suspicion of Dorran, new theories emerged in the 1950s suggesting one of the victims may have been the killer, and the others his victims. But the logistics make little sense. It remains an enigma. Little known fact: a 1971 hiker claimed to find a hand-carved figure near the lake. 3 men bound together in wood, their faces hollowed. The carving disappeared after being sent to a local historical society. Unresolved controversy. In 1986, a relative of Edward Nichols claimed to possess a letter written by Roy Wilson confessing to betraying a blood pact. The letter was never authenticated. It has since gone missing. You kneel by the lake again, just as the snow starts falling. Soft, silent, heavy. The lake hasn't spoken since that spring. It doesn't need to. It watches. A still eye in the wilderness, a place where time holds its breath. You sit with it, listening, not for words but for weight, for the gravity of something unfinished, of 3 men frozen into legend, of a cabin that remembers, of silence that doesn't just fall. It lingers. You laugh once quietly when you recall the weirder footnotes. A traveling preacher once declared the lake God's mouth, sealed with ice. The sheriff's grandson turned the case files into a stage play. It closed after 3 nights due to overwhelming dread. A tourist left a rubber duck at the site of the old cabin in 2004 with a note for the dogs: sorry about the ending. Time keeps walking. People forget, but here's what you remember: the stillness of the cabin, the ghostly neatness of the boots, the sound of something large cracking under the lake, and the feeling bone deep that the killer never left the forest. Maybe he died there, maybe he lives there still, or maybe the forest absorbed him, like it does all things eventually, not out of malice, just out of patience. The last time you visit, the fog is so thick you can barely see the trees. You walk out onto the frozen lake and stand in the center, eyes closed. There's no sound, and then, very faintly, you hear it, the bark of a dog. The camera pulls back. You're a silhouette now, standing in the middle of a lake that holds too many secrets, too many names. The wind dances over the ice, carrying whispers that may never be answered, and in the distance, a line of